in a Cornfield is based off of the YA slasher novel written by Adam Caesar that spawned a whole trilogy. I think I've heard rumblings of a fourth one as well. This one is made by Shudder. It's going to be on their streaming service at some point. Right now it is in theaters. And in this film, we focus on a girl and her father, Quinn and Glenn Maybrook. They have just moved to this small town, middle of nowhere, to get away from some family tragedy, even though that might be splitting the father-daughter dynamic a bit. Quinn gets more invested in the town, and Glenn's got his new job coming up, but then right around the time that the Founders Day celebration is coming in this town, we have the looming threat that eventually exposes itself as this clown in a cornfield just emerges out of a cornfield and starts murdering some teens. I love when I get to use props. This is something you might not know, but I have read every single book in the trilogy. I think I bought the first one when I first heard that the team that was producing Smile had acquired the rights to it, and I was like, oh, I just saw Smile, and that was really good. This is something that I could get into before, the movie comes out, and I really enjoyed all three of these books a lot. I was honestly kind of surprised by some of the directions they took, not even just with the first one, which is the movie we're going to talk about, but even the sequels. Literally each time I found myself going like, I'm really surprised that they're doing this, you know what I mean? It feels very different from what they could have done. So my interest in the movie adaptation only spiked even more, especially since it seemed like Adam Caesar was giving his full blessing to the whole team. I was also as far as people to pick to make this movie, Eli Craig is definitely a solid one. I've not seen Little Evil. I'm not sure what the consensus on that one was, but I have seen Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, which is one of the best horror comedies out there, if you ask me. So funny, but also so brutal. And I thought, yeah, he has the right sensibilities for a movie like this. I'd love to see what he could do. And it seemed like just in combination with Little Evil, kind of sticking more with comedic horror kind of routes, fueling that into Clown in a Cornfield could be really good. I went in fully expecting to play the compare game, because when I'm reading a book in general, I'm usually trying to visualize what the movie could be anyways. So I knew going in okay, you gotta separate what you think an adaptation of the book would be versus what they're doing here, because that was something I definitely noticed watching it, was that they have definitely made one that is a bit more fun, I think. The book, without spoiling too much of the why or the how, it's a fucking massacre in that first one, when the initial clown attack happens, it's Jesus Christ, you know what I mean? Even the opening scene of this film is different than what they opened the book with, which I wasn't necessarily surprised by. I was surprised that they came back to a certain plot beat around that kind of later. But I kind of knew okay, the movie, it could be a budget thing as well. Apparently this costs around or a little under $1 million, which I'm honestly kind of surprised by. But it could also just be, as far as tone, you don't want to have these jokes and zingers flinging about with characters that you've grown to like, and then just see bloodbath, just everyone, and especially the way that they die as well, just very gruesome. I love the way, if I can talk about the book real quick, I love the way Adam Caesar writes. He writes these really, descriptive, very gnarly details as far as the murders and stuff. It's a really wonderful atmosphere for a horror novel, and this one is definitely trying to be a bit more okay, we can have our gruesome kills, but we also need it to be a bit more fun. This is for teens, not necessarily gateway horror, because the kills are still pretty gruesome. I'm not saying it's for kids. I'm saying for teens, this could be a good one for them to see before, if they haven't ventured into the Terrifier realm yet. This could be not necessarily the next step to, but just the start of their adventure into that if they wanted to. And I think I wanted to address really quickly, just based off of a previous review I did for Until Dawn, where I was talking about, I played the game, I'm a fan of it, it's hard to put my bias aside, it's just not a great adaptation, here's, things that they did, and I'm not sure how it connect. I'm sure maybe some of you might be oh, is he just gonna do the same shit again, where he's oh, it's not a great adaptation. And no, I'm not gonna do that, because yeah, there are certain things, and we'll talk about certain things as far as my brain with the book, but I think, Eli Craig and the team here did a really great job of making their own thing, and they're not even doing a completely different original thing and just using the title. It's the story, it's just they go about telling it in some different ways that I really appreciated and really liked. Eli Craig directs some really great kill and horror sequences. Plenty of points where I was like, that's really impressive. I really love what they're doing here. You know, I love a lot of the camera work and the slow build-up editing to some of it. I think there's a couple technical things as far as like certain like false jumps early on, or like, you know, the squeaking of Frendo's shoes that sometimes, you know, appears and doesn't, just purely based off of if the filmmakers wanted to use that sound or not. But other than those like smaller little things, I thought this is a really well-helmed movie that balances those gnarly kills and really suspenseful sequences with a couple like pretty solid jokes. I'm not gonna act like every joke hits, because every once in a while there's one where I had to like pause, be like, okay, if it now feels like the character's becoming self-aware, and I'm not necessarily, it kind of depends how you use that. And I think there's also a couple points where line reads could have been a bit better as far as like your directing of actors. But, you know, to get into another point, I thought everyone did a really great job here, acting-wise. Like, Katie Douglas playing Quinn, I didn't know anything about her going into this, but I thought she did a really great Quinn. And something that speaks for all of the, like, teen characters that they have here is that it's very easy to just, I think nowadays also, just make them all kind of like stereotypical teens. Like, they're either moody or they're just obnoxious and you hate them. And I feel like they found a good balance with all of the teen characters of having you understand, like, yeah, they're teen, they're gonna do, you know, dumb things, or they're gonna act, you know, a certain way, you know what I mean? But, you know, they are also, you know, they're teens, you know, they can get emotional, especially with certain things that have, you know, happened with them that they're kind of, you know, coping with as they're growing up, you know? I thought they did a really great job of balancing that. And, you know, Quinn Maybrook, obviously, you know, her and her father have, you know, some family tragedy, so that kind of fueling this moody attitude, but not like a, oh, come on, just grow up, Quinn, you know what I mean? It's like, no, like, she has like some very understandable, like, kind of reasons, you know, for why she's like so upset. And I love how they can still, you know, recognize the kind of connection and have the bonding moment with her character and Carson McCormick's Cole, who I recognize from the Shazam movies. He's the bully. And in this one, you know, you might think he's going to be another character like that. But no, they find a good way to find that empathetic kind of natural balance of like, he's actually like, he's a pretty nice guy and pretty understanding, you know, very empathetic, you know, it's just, he's growing up. Even when he's interacting with like his group of friends, you might be like, oh, these are the ones that are causing trouble. Oh, look at them as soon as you get them together. Even they're fun and you spend enough time with them where you're like, yeah, they're not that bad. They, you know, they might be a little annoying sometimes, but they're not that bad. You know, they do a really great job with character work in this, which is like, that was the one thing I was like, you cannot do this novel and kind of skip out on that stuff, you know what I mean? But they did a good job with it. Like the character of Rust, for example, played by Vincent Muller, who, like, when I was watching this, I was like, this is definitely in my, this was one of the things where I was like, in my head, I think I was reading it a different way, but he does do a really great job of, you know, capturing this character. It was one of those things where I was like, when I was reading the book, I think I was picturing it a different way, but, you know, seeing the movie here, it's like, it's not wrong, you know what I mean? It's totally, like, it actually, like, really lines up and makes me see the book in a different way. It kind of enhances the book in some ways as far as, like, that character, that characterization, you know, really, really cool stuff. A couple other performers I wanted to mention, Will Sasso, it was when I was reading the cast list, it was him and Kevin Durand, who I was like, okay, I know those two. But when I heard that he was playing Sheriff Dunn, I was like, oh, he's gonna be perfect for that. And he was really fun to watch here, really good stuff. But I was really impressed by Kevin Durand as Arthur Hill, Cole's dad, you know, the mayor of this small town, and he's working with this ridiculous, goofy Southern kind of accent that I loved. You know, he's a really fun actor. I love him in Abigail. You know, I feel like every time he pops up, he's a really good addition. Looks like Elon Musk. That's something you got to get over. but he's a lot of fun to watch here, and I really enjoyed his performance. Really surprised that he had that kind of, you know, goofy accent in him. So overall, I thought this movie was really technically well made. A lot of great suspenseful sequences, but a lot of great comedy to balance it out. Great cast of characters that they've adapted here with some really great performers filling the roles. And, you know, they retain a lot of the basic, you know, fundamentals of the narrative that I found really compelling in the novel. And I really liked what they did there, and I love the character bonding work that they do narratively. If I had to have a couple other issues besides the ones that I already mentioned, there's definitely a point in the third act where I was like, okay, I feel like in the book they built up to this a bit more, and in this, I think even just for any other movie, this might be a tough pill to swallow, or just kind of like a weird shift for some people. It's, you know, obviously it's in the third act, I can't really spoil what it is, but you know, you'll kind of see what I mean. It does happen a little quickly and in very like expository nature, where, you know, I can see some people kind of getting pushed away from it, and I kind of was. I was kind of missing a certain je ne sais quoi, a certain finesse that I think the book had as far as that reveal. I also think that there's an incorporation of Glenn Maybrook, Quinn's father, played really well by Aaron Abrams. He did a really great job, kind of exactly how I pictured him in the book. But they kind of change certain details about how he gets involved, I recall, and it didn't seem to flow as well in this as opposed to the book. That was one where I was like, I think you should have kept the other way, you know, or changed it in a different way, you know, because it didn't necessarily flow very smoothly for me in this one. Overall, though, I think they did a really great job still of keeping the basic fundamentals that make the narrative compelling. It's going to surprise some people that aren't familiar with the material, and I think they're going to enjoy the movie a lot because of that. So they've made a really good adaptation here. I'm going to give Clown in a Cornfield a B-. I would love to see if they can make 2 and 3, especially with the pretty good box office opening that they had with the 1 million or under budget that they had. Like I was saying earlier, I was surprised, and when you watch the movie, I'm like, maybe it's like 5 million, like it's on the lower side. I was kind of surprised that it could be potentially under 1 million, and I think that's just a good testament to, you know, the filmmaking team here, what they were able to do with the limited resources, you know, still making it look pretty much like a Hollywood production. Like they had some money, you know, you never saw this and were like, oh, this looks a little cheap. Like it looks like a pretty solid, like maybe Blumhouse limited, but not too low kind of production, one of those. They did a really great job here, and I would love to see if they could come back around, because I love Eli Craig, what he did directing-wise, and I love what the cast did with the characters. I'd love to see them come back and see if they, you know, stick with the directions that Adam Caesar went with his novels. I think in particular that would make it all the more interesting, and more people I think would be surprised with those like they were with this. But if you've seen Clown in a Cornfield, leave your thoughts in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.